"Somebody get this man a chair before he drops the rifle." The laughter that followed was the particular kind that young men produce when performing confidence for each other. Sharp, reflexive, not entirely unkind, but not kind either. It moved through the firing line at Camp Pendleton like a small wave. And then it subsided, and the young men returned to looking very capable in their clean digital camouflage and their ballistic-rated eyewear, and their rifles bristling with optics and laser rangefinders and thermal attachments worth more than most used cars. Sergeant First Class Danny Mercer was 26 years old and stood at the center of the line with the easy authority of a man who has been told by several credible sources that he is exceptional. He had the build of someone who does not miss days, and the expression of someone who has stopped wondering whether he is impressive. He watched the old man and waited for the laughter to finish, and stepped forward. Eugene Holt was 79 years old. He stood at the far end of the firing line in a faded olive work shirt with sleeves rolled to the elbow, worn canvas trousers, and scuffed leather boots polished so many times the leather had gone the color of old mahogany. His hands were the first thing anyone noticed. Large, the knuckles swollen by decades, the fingers showing the faintest tremor at rest. The kind of tremor that is not weakness, but the accumulated record of what a body has carried across 8 decades. He held a bolt-action rifle, long and cloth-wrapped at the stock, the wood dark with oil and years of use, fitted with a scope older than every soldier on the line except the man holding it. Eugene Holt did not react to the laughter. He was still. His eyes were somewhere down the range. The range at Camp Pendleton smelled of cordite and marine layer fog and the dry grass undertone of a California morning that had not yet decided about the temperature. Flags at 3 intervals snapped in directions that did not entirely agree. The far target at 3,000 meters was a small dark interruption in the pale distance, barely visible to the naked eye, the kind of distance that causes trained snipers to reach for wind charts and ballistic calculators. Specialist Torres, standing nearest Eugene, watched him with attention different from the others. The way he held the rifle, the way his eyes moved downrange, the way his hands rested, and something she did not yet put into words. Mercer stepped closer. "Sir," he said, the word wrapped in the kind of courtesy that is itself a dismissal, "this line is a 3,000-meter qualification exercise. I don't know who authorized your access today, but I'm going to need to ask you to step back before someone gets—" "The wind is changing," Eugene said. His voice was a low, unhurried thing, not a rumble exactly, more like the sound of something that has settled into its register after a long time and has no intention of leaving it. He had not looked at Mercer. His eyes were still down the range, tracking something that the men with their laser rangefinders were not looking for. "It's been right to left at about 12 miles an hour for the last 20 minutes, he continued. "But there's a thermal building off the ridge at bearing 270 that's going to push it variable in the next 4 to 5 minutes. Left to right at the mid-range, still right to left. At distance. 2 winds. The target at 3,000 is going to sit in a corridor between them for about 90 seconds, and then it's going to be a different problem." He paused. "That's the window." Mercer held a beat of silence. Then he turned to the line and smiled. The smile of a man offering his audience a gift. "2 wins," he said. "He's got a system." A few of the cadets responded. He turned back to Eugene, and the smile stayed, but the warmth went out of it. "You know what we've got? We've got Kestrel 5700 ballistic weather meters. We've got applied ballistics software on our scopes, and we've got a team that's been training on this range for 8 months." He stepped closer, and his voice dropped to the register of a man who wants to be heard by an audience, but is pretending to have a private conversation. With respect, sir, your hands are shaking. I can see them from here. The scope on that rifle is 40 years old if it's a day. And the target you're talking about is at 3 kilometers. He let it land. Why don't you let us handle this one? Eugene Holt finally looked at him. His eyes were pale blue, the color of a winter sky at the moment before the weather arrives, and they held a quality that made several of the watching cadets look briefly away. Not anger, not hurt. A depth like looking down into a very cold and very deep well, the kind of depth that suggests the surface is not where the relevant things are happening. The hands are fine, Eugene said simply. Mercer let out a short, sharp laugh, genuine this time, surprised out of him, and turned to the nearest group of cadets and spread his hands in a what-do-you-do gesture that got the response he was looking for. He turned back, and the performance was back in full. All right, old-timer. He stepped in and put his finger on the cloth, rapping at the rifle stock, jabbing it lightly the way a man tests whether something is as solid as it appears. Tell you what. You show me something on that scope of yours that my team's $8,000 glass can't do, and I'll buy everyone on this line coffee for a week. Another jab at the cloth wrap. Deal? The cordite smell dropped away. The cold arrived first, not the Korean cold, which came for you with intention, but the specific dense wet cold of the Central Highlands, the kind that lived in the bones of your hands and made the difference between a skilled shot and a precise one a matter of will as much as technique. He was 20 years old, lying in a hide he had carved into a hillside above a river valley in Kongtrart province in December of 1965. 19 hours without moving more than his eyes. 19 hours in which the tremor in his hands, the one he had been born with, the one that had caused 3 army doctors to recommend against sniper school and that he had argued past each time with live-fire demonstrations, had subsided to nothing, the way it always did when the task was real enough to demand everything. The scope he was using was a Unner Teal, 10 power, given to him by the man who had trained him, Master Sergeant Calvin Rourke, a lean and deliberate man from western Montana who had learned to shoot on animals at distance and transferred that knowledge to the Army with the same unhurried certainty that characterized everything he did. Rourke had pressed the scope into Eugene's hands after the final qualification exercise and said, "You've got the stillness. Most men have to learn it and never learn it all the way. You were born with it. Don't waste it." Rourke was dead by October, killed by a sniper outside Nang while running a recon element that went loud. He was 41 years old. The scope had stayed with Eugene. His spotter, Private First Class William Cass from Akron, Ohio, who talked about his daughter the way religious men talk about faith, had been tracking the target through binoculars for 6 hours. The wind came off the valley in cross-cutting layers, 3 distinct currents, each moving differently. The ballistic solution was not a formula. It was a conversation with the air. Winds shifting at the valley mouth, Cass said, barely above breathing. I know. Give it 2 minutes. There was a temperature differential coming off the eastern slope that would produce a brief corridor of relative stillness at distance. It would last perhaps 90 seconds. He waited. His hands were absolutely still. The corridor opened. He took the shot. Hit, Cass said. Then Eugene, flanking element, valley mouth. The round came from the east. A sound like a very fast door closing. And then the world went sideways and Cass was pressing his field, dressing against Eugene's shoulder. 19 hours of perfect assessment, and he had been wrong about one position. I'm okay, Eugene said. You're going to be okay, Cass said, correcting him. That's different from okay right now. He was 19 years old. Eugene had misremembered his age. pressing his palms against another man's wound with the focused calm of someone who has decided a particular outcome is not acceptable. His own hands did not shake at all. 6 months later, William Cass stepped on a mine on a road outside Who. He never made it back to Akron. He never met his daughter, who had been born in January. Eugene Holt blinked. The California morning came back around him. The cordite, the marine layer, the flags snapping in half agreement about the direction of the wind. Mercer's finger was still on the cloth wrap of the rifle stock. Specialist Torres had been watching. She was the kind of person who watched carefully before she decided anything, and she had been watching since the old man walked onto the line. And she had been watching Mercer's escalation through its stages, with the specific discomfort of someone who knows that a situation is moving toward a conclusion that will be bad for everyone involved, including the person causing it. She had noticed the cloth wrap on the rifle stock, noticed it the way she noticed most things on a range, with attention to what it might mean. She had noticed the way the old man had described the wind at distance, with a specificity that none of their kestrel meters had yet produced. And she had noticed that 2 of the senior NCOs at the far end of the line had gone quiet in a way that was different from just watching. One of them, Staff Sergeant Grayling, who had 19 years in and was not easily impressed by anything, had taken one look at the old man's rifle and gone absolutely still, the way a person goes still when they recognize something they did not expect to encounter. Torres walked to Grayling, casually, the way you walk toward someone when you don't want the room to know you're walking toward someone. "Sergeant," she said quietly. "Who is he?" Grayling looked at her for a moment, then back at the old man. "If that's who I think it is, what's happening on this line is one of the most disrespectful things I've seen in 19 years. He paused. "Go find a phone. Call range operations. Ask for the duty officer. Give them the name Eugene Holt and tell them, don't ask, tell to run it right now. Don't tell Mercer." "Go." She found the duty officer, Lieutenant Park, in the range operations building, monitoring the exercise with the mild attention of someone who did not yet know something significant was happening on his range. Torres gave him the name in the tone Grayling had modeled, not a question. Park typed it. The silence that came over his face was not the silence of not knowing. It was the silence of knowing exactly, and that knowledge taking a moment to reconcile with the fact that this man was currently being jabbed at by a sergeant first class, while cadets laughed. "How long has he been out there?" 40 minutes, sir." Park was already picking up the phone. 2 transfers later, Torres heard him say the name into the receiver, and the response from the other end was audible across the room. Not the words, but the velocity of them. Park said, "Yes, sir, right now. He is on the range as we speak," and his knuckles whitened on the receiver, and when he hung up his expression was that of a man who understands that the next 15 minutes will define what people remember about this day. "There is a convoy on its way," he said. "Go back out there and do not let the situation escalate." Torres went back at a controlled walk that cost her something. On the line, Mercer had run out of patience. He had Eugene Holt's rifle in the conversation now, his hand on the cloth wrap, his voice in the register of final authority. "I'm going to need you to step back, sir. This is a live-fire exercise with active military personnel. Nada." The sound came from the range access road. It started as a bass note felt in the sternum before it was heard in the ears, the synchronized approach of vehicles moving with institutional urgency. The kind of urgency that communicates that whoever is driving has not observed the base speed limit once between their point of origin and this moment. 2 military Humvees and a command sedan came around the range building in tight formation and stopped hard at the firing line entrance, doors opening before the engines finished. 6 soldiers emerged from the first vehicles. Dress greens, They moved with the quiet precision of people who understand exactly what they are doing and why. The last door opened. Brigadier General Marcus Tate stepped onto the range hardpack. General Tate was 56 years old and wore one star and the expression of a man who has arrived somewhere that required arriving at quickly. He was not tall, but he was entirely solid. The kind of solid that does not come from time in the gym, but from time, specifically, in the kind of situations that either build a person into something or break them into something else. He came through the range entrance, and his eyes moved across the line once, assessing, and then they found Eugene Holt, and they did not move again. He walked directly toward the old man. He did not look at Mercer. He did not address the line of watching cadets or the senior NCOs or the range equipment or the 3-kilometer target that had been defeating the best-equipped shooters on the base for 2 days. His path was a straight line, and it ended at Eugene Holt, and nothing between them registered as an obstacle worth acknowledging. His boots on the hardpack were the only sound in a radius that was growing as people stopped making noise. He saw Mercer's hand on the cloth wrap of the rifle. His eyes moved to the hand. They stayed there for 2 full seconds. Something in his jaw. Mercer's hand came off the rifle. Brigadier General Marcus Tate came to attention in front of Eugene Holt and rendered the sharpest, most breathtakingly precise salute that Danny Mercer had ever seen in 6 years of military service. Not a greeting salute, not a courtesy. A salute with the full weight of institutional memory behind it, chin level, hand edge perfect, eyes fixed forward, every degree of the angle carrying something. He held it directed at the old man in the olive work shirt. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3. The silence that moved through the firing line was not sound. It was the collective recalibration of 23 people who had been looking at the wrong thing. Eugene Holt raised his right hand and returned the salute. The swollen knuckles, the tremor that had been there a moment before, the hands that had caused the laughter, none of it was visible in the geometry of that salute. He lowered it. General Tate lowered his. Mercer's face had lost its organizing principle. General Tate turned to face the line. He did not raise his voice. "I'm going to read something," he said, "and I want everyone present to understand what they are hearing." He produced a document from inside his jacket and unfolded it. Eugene Calvin Holt, Warrant Officer 2, United States Army, retired, service period, 1963 to 1987, 24 years. He let the number stand. Graduated the Special Forces Sniper Course, Fort Bragg, 1965, with the highest qualification score recorded in the course's history at that date. A record that stood for 11 years. He looked up briefly. Deployed to Vietnam 1965 to 1969 with the 5th Special Forces Group. Conducted over 200 confirmed long-range observation and interdiction missions. Confirmed engagements at ranges exceeding 2,400 meters on 6 separate occasions, at a time when the recognized maximum effective range for precision fire was 1,000 meters. He turned a page. Following Vietnam, assigned as primary instructor, Special Forces Sniper Course, 1970 to 1978. During that assignment, he authored the wind reading methodology that is still the foundational curriculum of every Army sniper school in this country. Not referenced, not adapted, still in use, as written. He held the pause. Recalled to consult on the development of the M24 sniper weapon system in 1984. The cant angle compensation protocol in your current scope mounts, the one your applied ballistics software depends on to calculate drift at distance, was his contribution. He refolded the document. The enemy had a name for him. North Vietnamese Army Command elements in Quang Tro Province issued an internal field advisory designating a shooter they could not locate and could not predict. They called him Ben Te Ti Then. He let the phrase land. The hand of death. Because he hit targets at distances they believed were not possible. Because by the time they understood where he was no longer there. No one on the line made a sound. The scope on that rifle, General Tate said, his voice steady as a fixed point, is the Unner TL-10 power given to him by his sniper instructor in 1965. His instructor was Master Sergeant Calvin Rourke, who set the previous record at the Special Forces Sniper Course, and who trained Eugene Holt to break it. He looked at Mercer directly now. The hands you laughed at have made confirmed shots at distances that remain in the top 20 longest in the history of the United States Army. He did not add anything to that. He didn't need to. And the tremor you saw, Sergeant, is a congenital condition he was born with. 3 Army physicians tried to wash him out of sniper school over it. He demonstrated each time that when he is still and the task is real, the tremor is not there. He looked at the rifle. It was never there when it mattered. The silence was absolute. General Tate looked at Mercer with the particular expression of a senior officer who has no desire to destroy a young person and every intention of correcting one. Sergeant, we will speak after this, at length. The formal counseling of Sergeant First Class Mercer began that afternoon and resulted in a mandatory remediation program, a letter of reprimand, and a reassignment to a training cadre role that gave him 6 months of proximity to the kind of history he had been too busy performing to notice. He was young and not a bad soldier, a good soldier who had confused the shine of his equipment with the depth of his knowledge. The institution understood the distinction. Out on the range, after the formalities concluded, a quiet settled over the firing line. The General Dynamics techs and the senior NCOs gathered themselves. The cadets found reasons to stay close. Eugene Holt picked up his rifle. He went to the line. He settled into his position with the economy of a man who has done this so many times that the rifle becomes an extension rather than an instrument. The adjustment of the stock, the natural alignment of eye to scope, the slow and deliberate management of breathing. The flags on the range were doing what he had told Mercer they would do. The wind at mid-range had shifted, and there was a corridor of relative stillness developing at distance. He had 4 minutes, perhaps 5. He waited. Specialist Torres, standing 3 feet away at the observation position, watched his hands on the rifle. They were absolutely still. The corridor opened. The far target at 3,000 meters sat in a brief pocket of predictable air. The 2 winds divided around it like a river around a stone. Eugene Holt took 1 breath, let half of it out. The rifle spoke. The target at 3,000 meters ceased to exist. The range went silent, not the silence of people not speaking, but the silence of people who have just watched something they will describe for the rest of their lives and are not yet ready to use words for it. Torres did not move for a moment. Eugene had already begun to lower the rifle, his eyes returning from the distance with the unhurried quality of a man coming back from somewhere he knows well. General Tate, standing at the observation line, caught Eugene's eye, and something passed between them that did not require language. The acknowledgement between people who understand the weight of what has been demonstrated and have no need to perform that understanding. After the range cleared, Eugene walked to where Mercer stood. He placed a hand on the same shoulder Mercer had loomed over earlier, gently, the inversion quiet and deliberate. Mercer looked at the hand, looked up. "You've got good instincts," Eugene said, and his voice was exactly what it had always been, unhurried, low, the register of a man who made his decisions about volume a long time ago. "The equipment your unit has out here is genuinely extraordinary. Better than anything I trained with, better than anything I could have imagined in '65. He removed his hand. But the wind doesn't care about your equipment. The wind doesn't know what your scope cost. It just moves. He glanced down the range once. You've got to learn to read it with your face before you read it with your meter. When the meter and your face disagree, your face is usually right. He paused. Give it time. Give it a lot of time. He walked away from the range in the direction of the parking area and did not look back. It was a Sunday morning 6 weeks later, at a diner in Oceanside. Mercer was in a booth near the window, in civilian clothes, with the particular quietness of a man who has had several weeks of forced proximity to his own assumptions and is still working through what he found there. He was looking at a menu without reading it when he registered, through the window, the olive-work shirt. He was outside and across the parking lot before he had decided to be. Mr. Holt. Eugene Holt turned from the direction of his car. He looked at Mercer the way he had looked at the range, with a patience that was not warmth exactly, but contained the possibility of warmth if the right conditions developed. "Sergeant," he said. Mercer stopped a decent distance away and stood there for a moment without the support of rank or uniform or audience to hold him up. "I owe you an apology," he said. "What happened on that range, what I said, what I did, it was wrong. I was performing for people instead of paying attention, and I took it out on you, and that was wrong." He paused. "I'm sorry." Eugene Holt looked at him for a long, even moment. Then he nodded, a single, deliberate nod, the kind that closes a thing without erasing it. "You hungry?" he said. Mercer blinked. "Sir?" Eugene gestured toward the diner with a slight inclination of his head. "Come on. The eggs are good here. I'll buy." He was already turning toward the door. Mercer stood in the parking lot for a moment, holding his apology, which had just been accepted in about the most matter-of-fact way possible. Then he followed. They sat for an hour. Mercer asked one careful question about the wind methodology, and Eugene answered it, and the answer took 20 minutes and covered things not in any curriculum Mercer had encountered. He wrote some of it on a napkin. Eugene watched him write, and said nothing except once to correct a detail. When Mercer looked up, Eugene was watching the parking lot with the expression of a man perfectly comfortable in a quiet moment. Eugene picked up the check before Mercer could reach it. He left a tip that was more than the meal. Quiet heroes walk among us every single day. They sit in diners and stand at ranges and say one precise sentence that changes the way you understand the air. They carry the weight of what they've survived in objects that look old and worn until someone finally looks closely enough to understand what is being carried and what it cost. We don't always deserve them. They show up anyway. If you were moved by Eugene's story of quiet courage and timeless wisdom, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see it, and be sure to subscribe to Veterans Valor for more stories of America's unassuming heroes. And click that notification bell so you never miss a story of the quiet warriors who walk among us.